This is one of the most soul-satisfying late-night, drunken, sober-up snacks. That's delicious. Welcome to Project Foodie. My name is Daniel Holzman. I'm the chef and owner of the Meatball Shop restaurants in New York City. And you are here in my home kitchen in Brooklyn, New York, where we are about to cook kimchi fried rice with fried Spam and fried eggs. This recipe has 4 simple steps and it should take about 30 minutes. Today on Project Foodie, we're gonna make a dish that I make for myself all the time, especially when I'm a little bit tipsy. This is one of my late night, drunken, sober up snacks. Kimchi fried rice with fried Spam and fried eggs. I first encountered this dish, my dear friend Roy Choi, who's an amazing chef in California. Actually, his wife is an incredible Korean chef, and she introduced me to this dish, and I've been making it ever since. I would make this meal for myself. I would make this meal for anybody that happened to be with me after a night at the bar, or, you know, the reality is I make this early in the week because it makes amazing leftovers. A lot of us, you know, culinary types, foodies as it were, might poke our nose up at Spam. However, Spam is actually very, very delicious. It's basically salty hot dogs in a can. And in Korean cuisine, it's one of the quintessential ingredients. During the Korean War, the Americans had Spam in the commissary. And obviously at the time, you know, of war, folks didn't have a ton of food to choose from, and so there was a lot of Spam available, and the Koreans actually incorporated it into their cuisine, and from then on you found traditional Korean dishes made with Spam. Actually the same thing in Hawaii. You find a lot of Spam in Hawaiian cuisine because of the American occupation of our state. We'll get into that next time when we talk about Spam with Subia. First and foremost, I want to gather all of our ingredients and have everything sensibly laid out. In a restaurant, we call this mise en place. It means having everything ready at a hand's reach for when you need it. Step 1, we're going to start our rice and we're going to cook our Spam. So, here's the deal. Whenever we're making rice and we want the kernels to all be little perfect separate pieces, we need to rinse it well. We're going to remove the starch. So, in order to do that, I'm going to take the proper amount of rice measured, and in the pot that we're going to cook it in, I'm actually going to wash it under ice cold water, giving it a really vigorous stir. And you're going to see the water will immediately become cloudy, and that's actually the starch coming out of the rice. So under cool water, and you'll notice that the rice will float up. By stirring it, it should all sink so that we don't lose any. And you can see that the water immediately becomes really, really cloudy as the starch from the rice is released. I'm just going to leave the water on, just kind of dripping in there, so that over the next couple of minutes it's going to wash out that starch, giving it a stir every couple of minutes to release as much of the starch as possible. And while that's rinsing, we're actually going to start our Spam. So in whatever heavy-bottomed pot we're going to actually fry our rice in, and you can use a wok or you can use a skillet. In this case I use this like nice cast iron pan. I'm going to heat it, and the heavier the pan, the longer it takes to heat up. So over a medium-high flame, we're just going to heat our pan. And while that's heating up, we're going to take our Spam and, using our lovely pull tab, drop this bad boy right. Give it a little squeeze to let some air in. And then we're just going to drop it right on our cutting board. Slicing it into 4 even slices. So we slice it into 4 even slices, at which point we're going to take it into our pan with just a little bit of oil just to start it, so that all of the Spam is in contact with the pan. If you put it in a dry pan, what happens is it doesn't all touch and it tends to get some burnt spots. But because there's a little bit of oil in the pan, it all connects, and we want to lay it down so that it's all touching the pan. So you want a big enough pan that they can all flatly touch. And actually the Spam has a lot of fat in it, so it's going to release its fat, and it's going to lubricate itself, and it's going to fry. And then we're actually going to keep that fat, and we're going to fry our rice in that same thing. It's going to be very, very delicious. Very, what do you call that? Indulgent and delicious, otherwise known as fatty and gross, because we're frying Spam and eggs, and this is not the kind of thing you want to eat every day if you want to live past 40. So we've got our Spam starting to sizzle away, and what we really don't want is to burn it, and we also don't want it to, well, we want to get like a nice crust. So over that, again, like medium-high flame, not super high, we're just going to let this go. While that's going, we can check back on our rice. You can see that now that the rice has been rinsing for a couple of minutes here, the water is starting to clear up. So what we can do is we can just turn off the water, and we're going to drain all of the water out of the pot, being careful that once we get to that end part that we don't lose any of the rice. You can usually do this, just being careful. If you are feeling nervous about it, you can use a strainer. But basically we're going to drain most of the water out, or almost all of it out. And then measuring, we're going to put 1.25 times the amount of rice we started with. So if we started with a cup of rice, we're going to put a cup and a quarter of water into the pot measured. I've learned a lot of ways from a lot of people to make rice in a pot like this. Actually, my friend Roy, his wife, who taught me how to make this dish, who's Korean, she told me that you put enough water that the water raises up 1 knuckle above the amount of rice. It just so happens that if I measure the rice based on the package instructions, that also happens. I don't know exactly how it works because everybody's knuckles are different, but it turns out that it works. So I'm not going to question ancient wisdom because I've got some scientific proof that proves it wrong, when at the end of the day, the rice just tastes good. So our rice is going to go over a medium-high flame. We're going to bring it up to a boil, at which point we're going to put it on its absolutely lowest flame setting, just to a simmer. If you have an electric stove, which keeps a lot of its heat, you want to use a different burner because you want to actually turn it way down. The rice needs to steam for about 20 minutes. So coming up to a boil, and then we're going to cover it with our tightly fitting lid, and we're going to reduce the flame to a simmer. We can give a little peek at our Spam and see what it looks like under here. And if it's sticking, it's definitely not ready to turn, but you can see that it's starting to brown a little bit, but we really want a nice crust and a deep golden brown. That's super important. So maybe just give this a little nuzzle, and be careful because this is very supple. This meat is quite supple. It'll break apart on us at this stage. And I'm just going to continue frying away here. So our rice is cooking, our Spam is frying, and that's really it for step 1. Step 2, we're going to prep our veggies. Basically, we've got a couple of scallions, we've got our onion, our ginger, our garlic, and our kimchi. What we want to do is, first and foremost, we are going to slice our onion. So taking our onion, we're just going to cut both sides, the bolster side and the stem side, off, about a ½ inch each. So we're removing the bolster. Unlike dicing, when we want to retain the bolster, in this case we can just remove it. You can slice the entire thing straight in half, straight down, and then we're going to peel any of the outer leaves right off of the onion very easily. And there are a couple of different directions that we can slice our onion in. We can either go kind of, you can see that there's some ribbed lines in there, which are the grain or the kind of like, there's some fibers. The onion grows in this direction up. We can slice it this way, which is called Parisienne, or we can go into half moons. In this particular case, we're going to go into half moons. So we're just going to slice it to basically 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, half moons, straight down. Right? Our Spam is talking to me. feel like we're going to take another peek here and see if it's starting to get golden brown. And look at that. Make sure that we rotate the pieces so that it's evenly browned. So sometimes the middle of our pan is a little hotter than the outside. Give it a little rotation to make sure that we get even browning here. If it starts to cook too quickly, if it's really screaming at you, you can always turn it down. Remember that a cast iron pan like this takes a long time to heat up because it's really heavy and thick. It takes a long time to cool down. It's going to retain its heat. So there's no really adjusting the temperature very quickly. We can break off a piece of ginger the size that we need, a little piece like that. There's a kind of hard, rough end that we can trim. And trimming it into basically that maybe 1-inch tube or however long we want it, we can then peel it. And I use a spoon to peel it. Just place the ginger on the cutting board and you just kind of scrape it with a spoon. And what you'll see is that the ginger skin is kind of really delicate and it scrapes right off very easily with a spoon, making it not only really easy to peel, but you actually get 100% yield. You're not losing any of the actual fruit of the ginger like you would if you were to trim it with a knife or with a peeler. So using a spoon is a great trick and it's the main way that I use. If you have some extra stems or scraps that are kind of too little to peel, those are great for making tea with. So even with the stem, you just make you just chop them up and you can throw them into your tea and they're very delicious. You can see that our rice has come up to a boil. I'm actually hearing that, which means that it's time. We're going to drop it down to really the lowest flame possible. Cover it up. Our Spam should be ready to flip, so I can just take it, and whenever I'm flipping something in hot frying oil, I always flip it away from myself. When I flip it towards myself, if I happen to splatter, it splashes towards me. If I flip it away from myself, I can flip with abandon, because if it splatters away from me. I don't burn myself. And you can see that it's got really nice, crispy and golden brown. If there's any kind of like burnt bits at all, we can trim them off later, but that is actually what I'm going for. I want all of that fried Spam flavor, so I am not worried about that nice hard seal. So once we've peeled our ginger, we're just going to mince it. And to mince our ginger, I can take it on put it on a kind of a flat spot. And we want to slice into thin slices in one direction. And then I'm obviously not being overly careful here because I'm just making fried rice, but we're just going to slice in one direction first. And then we can restack our pieces and we can dice in the second direction, so we make little like really thin matchsticks. And then once we have our kind of thin matchsticks, if I'm moving too quickly for you, you can always hit slow motion, people. We're going to turn it 180 degrees and then we're going to slice our matchsticks into little tiny dice. And we're making fried rice. So if your pieces are not absolutely perfect, it's completely fine. It's going to be very delicious. If anything, some bigger and smaller pieces are going to give a little bit of variety and some extra spicy little bits and bites. So do not be overly anal or OCD about this. It's completely fine. We can slide that to the side. I'm going to just check on our Spam here for a second. And I think we could still use another few seconds. We have some cloves of garlic, so just kind of pulling them out of our fresh garlic. I like to use the side of my knife and giving it a little pound makes it really easy to release the garlic from the skin. It also starts the chopping process, but look at how easy it is to peel the garlic that way. One of my favorite tricks. I feel like people that are struggling over peeling garlic should just download Project Foodie and take a load off. Slice off just that stem end and then give that a little mince. Now, you know, there are lots of different kind of like base ingredients. When I talk about French food, I might think about, you know, carrot, onion, and celery or as the kind of like base ingredient, the, I don't know, the trio or whatever it is, the like mirepoix, the base of all the sauces. When I think of Asian food, I think of ginger garlic scallion as the kind of like flavor, the base of all the flavors. So I'm taking ginger garlic scallion. When I fry those together, I get that quintessential kind of like Asian flavor. So our scallions, we can just cut them. We're actually going to add them at the very end as a garnish. So I'm just going to take them and I'm going to slice them a little bit on the bias. These are going to get gently cooked, but they're going to remain raw, so slicing them nice and thinly. So on the bias is on an angle like this versus straight across. I'm not biased. Get it? Anybody really find that extremely funny? If so, you should check in with your local psychiatry clinic, because you got issues, buddy. Get it? Get that? This kimchi is actually pre-cut into little pieces, but I want all these pieces to be bite-sized. So if it's in big pieces, sometimes when kimchi is made, it's whole. It can actually need a little chop, so give it a chop if necessary. And we can pull our Spam out. It's nice and browned on both sides, so I'm going to pull that out, and I'm actually just going to let this cool over here on our cutting board. I'm going to turn off the flame under the Spam and let that frying pan kind of cool down a little bit. It's smoking hot. You can see that on both sides it's kind of really nice and golden brown. It's sizzling. I don't know if, can you hear that? Put it to the microphone here. Speak to the microphone. That's the sound of pork frying. That's one of the most glorious sounds in the entire world. I don't know if you know about North Korea and their indentured like camps of slavery. They have 3 generations of slavery where they actually take somebody for doing a crime and they not only imprison them, they imprison their children and they imprison their grandchildren. So for 3 generations you're imprisoned. And there are only a few people that have ever escaped, and one of them escaped. He wrote a book about it. He came to here. It's called Escape from Camp 14. It was absolutely enthralling. And the reason he escaped, I mean, this man had been tortured. His body had been raked over hot coals. I mean, tortured like tortured you'd never believe. I think he actually had to chop off his mother's hand for dropping a typewriter. I mean, something like that. He escaped because he heard the guards talking about the smell of grilling meat. And so he dragged himself over barbed wire to get out of that camp for grilling meat. That is the power of grilled meat. And that is the end of step 2. Step 3, we're gonna cook our veggies and fry the rice. So for step 3, we're actually going to make our fried rice. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take a second and clean ourselves up. So to start our stir fry, we've got our pan where we cooked our Spam in there. It's got all that delicious pork fat, and it's cooled down a little bit, but it's still kind of hot. And over a medium flame, I'm going to add our ginger and garlic. Now we don't want to burn our garlic, so we might want to move a little bit fast. I make sure I have everything here. If our garlic starts to burn, you can always use a couple of tablespoons of water to cool the pan down. Basically, we're going to take our garlic and ginger, and we're just going to drop those right in. And you can hear them sizzling away. Using our special stir-fry utensil, we're going to give those a little bit of a saute, and we basically just want to release the flavor. I can smell it immediately. And right as the garlic is about to start to brown, because there's almost nothing worse than the flavor of burnt garlic, but right as the garlic is about to brown, we're going to add our onions, and that is actually going to slow the cooking process down. So our onions go right in, sliced onions, and we can break those up a little bit, and you can hear them kind of sizzle. Onions have a lot of water in them. You can imagine the onion is cooler than the pan, so that heat is going to get sucked out of the pan and slow it down so that the garlic doesn't burn. And we just basically want to wilt these onions. So we're going to cook them for about a minute or so, just to kind of take the bite off, but we still want them, even after it's all done, to retain a little bit of their crispiness. While our onions are cooking, we can just dice up butter. So basically, we're going to add some butter, and we want to make sure that it kind of melts into all the rice. So I'm just going to take some slices of butter and make sure that they're not in big pieces so that it melts evenly. And I can get that prepared and on the side. We can take our Spam that's been fried and dice that. So about the same size as it was thick. We're just going to kind of slice through the Spam into nice little logs. And then right as our onions start to brown, but before our garlic is burnt, everything is just kind of wilted and brown, we're going to add our kimchi. The kimchi has a lot of water, and that's going to cool it down and slow it. But we definitely want the kimchi to fry a little bit. So our kimchi is in, and we're going to boil off any of the water that's on there and mix that. You can see the chilies from the kimchi are mixing with the onions. Really, really gorgeous. Our rice has been cooking for a while. We're going to turn it off and let it steam the rest of the way. Do not fear the rice. Let the rice fear you. Keep it covered, do not peek. Raising the lid from the pot will allow the steam to escape and the rice will not be properly cooked. So I'm not afraid. There's actually a Jalaluddin Rumi saying that goes, "Fear not, do not raise the lid of the cauldron and be patient, for I am cooking you." I believe he was speaking about rice. We're going to leave that closed. Taking our Spam and dicing them into our lovely nuggets of salty fried pork loveliness. No, it's just so delicious. Our kimchi and our onions are nicely cooked together. We're going to add our gochujang. Woo! Party tonight. And our butter. And what is going to happen is that gochujang is quite sticky, but between the butter and all the moisture from all the vegetables, we're going to really want that to kind of like mix so you don't get like a big old bite of gochujang, which can be a little bit spicy. We're just going to cook all that together. Make sure that the gochujang dissolves nicely. That's delicious. My lordy lord, is that good. Now, this is the moment of truth, people. Our butter's melted, our onions, our kimchi are fried, our garlic and our ginger have seasoned our fried rice, but it is not fried rice without the rice. We're going to open the top of the pot. And we're going to look inside. And we're going to pray. And it's perfectly cooked! Because you listened and you didn't take the top off. I'm just going to actually take this and with our wooden spoon, go around the outside, and we're going to drop this right in. Now, this dish works really, really well with day-old rice. So if you have old rice, I like to keep it in a saran wrap in the freezer, and then you can just drop it right into here and it works absolutely perfectly. After the rice is cooled, the kernels kind of like solidify and it makes it even better. So it's almost better with cooled or day-old rice, but it works perfectly just like that. And you can see that we're just going to gently, without breaking up the rice, completely mix it all together. We're going to drop in our fried Spam. Now, here's the deal. We want to lower the flame to a medium low because once everything is mixed together, our scallions can go right on, oops, top as well. Once this is mixed together, what we're going to want to do is get a little bit of that delicious crust on the bottom. And in order to do that, we're just going to kind of, using our spatula, flatten the rice down into the pan and allow it to toast. And it's a little bit of a judgment game because you don't want to move the rice at all for it to toast, so you can't really check on it, but the last thing you want to do is burn it. So, you know, you can obviously cheat and peek in there and you'll get used to it after a while, but the rice will start to crackle in a very specific way and start to talk to you when it's ready. When rice talks to you, it says snap, crackle, pop. I mean, come on, people. What's advertising for? All right, so we're just going to take the back of our spatula, we're just going to pat the rice down, and over that medium flame, give it a little taste and make sure that I haven't screwed anything up here. Snap, crackle, pop, people. That is delicious. We're just going to pat it down, and over that medium-low flame, we're going to let the rice just toast on the bottom for about 3 or 4 minutes. And that is the end of step 3. Step 4, we're going to fry our eggs, plate, garnish, and serve. So for step 4, we're just going to melt our butter in our frying pan. And we're going to fry a couple of eggs. So, got our butter melting. We kind of clean up because we're really just ready to plate and serve this amazing meal that I'm so excited about. So, our rice has been toasting for a couple of minutes here. I'm just going to turn it off because there's residual heat in the pan and I don't want it to burn. It'll continue to go. Our butter has melted in our nonstick pan, and before it browns, I'm just going to take our eggs. On a flat surface, we're going to give them a crack, and opening them up carefully, we're going to drop them in without breaking the yolk or dropping the eggshell in there and ruining Christmas. Carefully, we're going to embarrass ourselves on camera by cracking our egg perfectly, not breaking the yolk. And we're just going to fry these eggs. Got a little shell in here which I can just gently remove. And over a medium flame, we're going to lower this guy down. That was me doing like a so excited, so hungry, so delicious. Fried Spam and eggs is my favorite thing to eat. My God. We have artisanally made mid-century modern Heath ceramic pot made by Edith Heath in Northern California in Petaluma. I only eat fried Spam and eggs off of artisan Tupperware. And once our eggs start to really crisp up like that, I can turn the flame off because I don't want a lot of color. I want them, maybe they can get a tiny bit brown on the bottom, but I want them for the most part to just kind of gently cook. And if you're worried, if you really don't like that kind of any of the raw white, you can always just give it a little bit of a break where you break up the kind of thickest part, and that'll help it to fall into the pan and cook through. If you are patient and you just let this sit, these eggs will cook perfectly. And if you don't like the yolk super, super runny, you can always flip them and make sunny side down. I believe they call that over easy where I'm from. You can always go over easy. But I'm going to go sunny side up because in this case, that yolk is going to run down and it's going to saturate the rice. So basically you've got this like really spicy, salty rice, and then you add that yolk, and the yolk is going to like, all that fatty yolk is going to sop that up, and it's going to be absolutely perfect. So we can take our rice and moving it. Whew, I love this frying pan. So we got it here, and we can just kind of scoop it up. And we can just take it. Wow, that is absolutely delicious looking. Right onto our plate. Ay, ay, ay. Do you see that like crispy rice bottom there we're talking about? That was what we're going for. It goes right there. And then on top of our rice, we're just going to drop one of our fried eggs really carefully so that I don't scratch my pan. Right on top there, a fried egg, and we can garnish with some sesame seeds and some of our sliced nori. And that, my friends, is an absolutely delectable, delicious foodie meal. Be sure to like and subscribe, check us on Instagram, and download the Project Foodie app on the iOS App Store. I hope you've enjoyed this Project Foodie cook-along, and I hope you'll join us for more. If you want to make kimchi fried rice with fried Spam and eggs, you're going to need the following ingredients. Some of these ingredients might seem a little less familiar to you if you don't spend a lot of time eating with sticks or perusing the ethnic aisles at your local grocery. However, I promise you there's nothing here that you should be intimidated by because we're just cooking simple fried rice. We just happen to be using some traditionally Korean ingredients to make a traditionally Korean dish. Perhaps you're familiar with this traditionally Korean ingredient, Spam, all-American favorite. Actually, in Korea, we find a lot of Spam because after the Korean War, when the Americans were over there, they introduced Spam into the social consciousness, the cuisine. There's a word for it. I'm not using it, but we've got some Spam, basically hot dogs in a can. Do not judge Spam by its raw state. It tastes a little bit like cat food. When you fry it, however, very, very delicious. Gets this amazing, salty, crispy, umami, rich flavor. Spam is absolutely an important ingredient here. However, if you don't prefer Spam, bacon works really well. And honestly, this is a great vegetarian dish if you don't want to put meat in it at all. We've got garlic and scallions, or green onions. We've got some vegetable oil. I'm using corn oil. We just want a neutral flavored oil. Any vegetable oil will do. I tend not to use olive oil when I'm making Asian food because I feel that the flavors kind of clash and it can be a little off-putting. Vegetable oil is great because it has a high smoke point, or it gets really hot before it lights on fire, which makes it great because you can fry things and get them really crispy in it because it's hotter. We have some sesame seeds, unsalted butter. I always cook with unsalted butter because I want to add the salt in separately and I don't want to be, tied to the amount of salt that's in the butter. Fresh ginger root, really easy to find and a great staple refrigerator pantry item because it lasts for a long time. I mean, a ginger root like this will last in my fridge for up to a month and a half, and I break off pieces as I need them. A little bit goes a long way, quite spicy. We have a short grained rice. In this case, I'm using sushi rice because it's actually kind of easy to find, inexpensive, good quality, and works really well. If you're a diehard, you would say that it's culturally insensitive to cook a Korean meal with Japanese ingredients. I happen to be a Jewish white guy. We're in New York, so like, sorry. But in the real life, very delicious. Find yourself some short grain Korean rice. Complain to your mama. We've got toasted nori. Hey, again, Japanese ingredient. What can I say? Basically, we're going to use a garnish. We're all familiar with toasted nori because we see those big black sheets that you use in sushi restaurants and otherwise. If you can only find it in the big sheets, you can dice it up yourself and turn it into slices. Great for garnish. I happen to have it already cut, which makes it a little easier. Skip a step. We have a yellow Spanish onion. Add a little bit of sweetness to our dish. Some eggs. And then I have this Korean chili paste that's become really, really popular lately. It's called gochujang. Repeat after me. Gochujang. Gochujang. I might not be pronouncing that correctly. So you might not want to repeat after me. Go down into the restaurant, into the supermarket and just get slapped in the face by some old lady because you told her something really rude. Not true. Actually, it's called gochujang. Basically, this is a Korean, not terribly spicy chili paste. It's a little bit sweet. It's got a ton of flavor, and it brings this dish to the next level. If you cannot find gochujang, that's fine. You can literally use any hot sauce and put the amount you prefer to get it as spicy as you want. I just happen to love gochujang. It's a type of thing you can definitely find on the internet. You can find it in most Korean grocers or Asian markets or markets in Asian neighborhoods. And a little bit goes a long way. A bucket like this will last me a long time, so it's worth investing in. Gochujang is the type of thing you want to use with care, and I would absolutely never eat anything with a lot of gochujang in it before an important event where I need to sit quietly and still in a populous area. You know, like maybe it would be fun if you were like traveling in a car with your family and you just wanted to smoke it out, you know, like hot box the car with your own essence. Gochujang would be a good late night snack for that ride. Maybe on an airplane where no one knows where it's coming from. But if we're talking choir, like church, let's keep the gochujang to ourselves. If you want to make kimchi fried rice with fried spam and eggs, you are going to need the following tools. I've got a small pot for making our rice. Here's the deal. Rice cookers make perfect rice. And if you are going to cook a lot of rice, you definitely want to invest in a rice cooker. They're not very expensive. I don't make a lot of rice, and I've got a small New York apartment, so I make my rice in a pot. The only trick is you have to use an appropriately sized pot. I'm making a little bit of rice, so I got a really small pot. Obviously, if I'm making more rice, I need a bigger pot. It's really hard to make a little bit of rice in a large pot and have it come out right. I've got a non-stick pan for frying an egg. You can fry an egg in a regular pan. They tend to be very tricky. They stick easily. You need to use a lot of oil, cook them hot. I love to cook eggs in a regular pan because I'm a chef and I'm trying to show off. Invest in a non-stick pan. It'll do you wonders. I've got a tasting spoon because this dish is absolutely irresistible and I'm going to want to taste throughout. Measuring spoons and measuring cups because you can't be too careful. The truth is I tend to eyeball things, but when I'm cooking rice, the measurement becomes important, so you're going to want to use your measuring spoons. We've got a metal spatula, a wooden stirring utensil. I happen to love this one because it's got this flat edge, which makes it great for scraping and getting all the nooks and crannies out of the corner of my pan. A knife and cutting board, and finally I have a heavy bottom or cast iron pan. I happen to have this very fancy Finex cast iron pan. This is like an artisanally made, handmade product from Portland, Oregon, where, I don't know, bearded hipsters with skinny jeans decided to revive a defunct foundry and make like the world's most expensive and very cool cast iron pan. Works really well, lasts forever, definitely will not get you laid, and I will say that this fireproof handle, not fireproof, burns the shit out of you, so be careful.